There are 3 AI assistants dominating the conversation in 2026. ChatGPT from OpenAI, Claude from Anthropic, and Gemini from Google. And depending on who you ask, each one is the best. The problem is that most comparisons you find online are either written by people who have barely used all 3 seriously, or they were written months ago when the models were completely different versions of themselves. AI moves fast. What was true at the start of the year is not necessarily true today. Capabilities change. Strengths shift. New features roll out that completely change how useful a tool is for a specific type of task. So I spent 3 weeks running real tests across all 3 platforms. Not academic benchmarks. Not synthetic leaderboard evaluations. Actual tasks that real professionals do every single day at work. Writing, research, long document analysis, coding, creative brainstorming, and reasoning through complex multi-step problems. And what I found surprised me, because the honest answer is not that one AI is best at everything. The honest answer is that each one is genuinely best at something specific. And knowing which one to open depending on what you are trying to accomplish is worth significantly more than any single subscription you could buy. By the end of this video you are going to know exactly which AI to use for which task. You're also going to understand why the people who get the most value out of AI in 2026 are not the ones who picked a favorite and stuck to it. They are the ones who learned to switch fluidly based on what the job actually requires. Let us start with a quick overview of each platform so we are all working from the same baseline. ChatGPT is made by OpenAI and is still the most widely used AI assistant in the world by a significant margin. The paid tier gives you access to their most powerful models and a growing ecosystem of tools including image generation, voice mode, web browsing, and code execution in a sandboxed environment. The paid tier also includes access to a large and growing library of third-party integrations and custom GPTs built by other users and companies. ChatGPT has the largest user base, the most community documentation, and the broadest ecosystem of any AI tool available today. Claude is made by Anthropic. The paid tier gives you access to Claude's most capable models and is particularly known for 2 things. First, an extremely large context window, which means Claude can hold and reason across a larger amount of text in a single conversation than most competing models. Second, a reputation for being more precise and less prone to the kind of confident-sounding errors that other AI tools sometimes produce on complex analytical tasks. Claude tends to be more careful about acknowledging uncertainty rather than filling in gaps with plausible-sounding but incorrect information. Gemini is made by Google. The paid tier integrates deeply into Google Workspace, which means it connects directly to your Gmail, Google Docs, Google Drive, and Google Calendar. Gemini also has native access to real-time Google search results built directly into the model, which gives it a structural advantage for anything that requires current information rather than knowledge from a training cutoff date. Now let us get into the actual test results because that is where the meaningful differences become clear. Round 1 was writing quality and tone. I gave all 3 the exact same task. Write a persuasive email to a potential client who went cold after a strong initial conversation. The email should feel warm and genuine, reopen the dialogue without sounding desperate, and close with a low-friction next step. Keep it under 150 words. All 3 produced functional outputs. But the quality differences were noticeable when you read them carefully. ChatGPT's version was clean and professional. The structure was solid and it stayed within the word limit. But it felt slightly generic, like it could have been written for any client in any industry. Gemini's version was competent but leaned more formal than the brief called for. It felt like a business letter rather than a genuine human reaching out. Claude's version was the clear standout. The tone had genuine warmth without crossing into sycophancy. The language felt natural and considered rather than template-generated. It acknowledged the specific dynamic of a conversation that had gone cold in a way that felt emotionally intelligent rather than transactional. For any writing task where tone and nuance determine whether the communication actually lands, Claude consistently performed best across my tests. This pattern held across multiple writing formats including sales copy, internal communications, and longer-form professional content. Round 2 was research and real-time information. This is where Gemini has a structural advantage that is difficult to overcome regardless of how good the other models are at reasoning. I asked all three about significant developments in a specific industry over the past 30 days. ChatGPT and Claude were transparent about their knowledge cutoff limitations and drew from their training data, which meant their answers were informative but not current. Gemini pulled live search results and synthesized genuinely up-to-date information in a structured response. If your work involves staying current on fast-moving topics, tracking competitor activity, monitoring regulatory changes, or any situation where the information from last month genuinely matters, Gemini is the right tool. This is not a small advantage for the professionals whose work depends on having current information. Round 3 was long document analysis. I uploaded a 42-page business strategy document and asked each AI to do 3 things. Identify the 3 biggest risks in the strategy that the authors might be underestimating. Find the most optimistic assumption in the document and explain why it is optimistic. And generate 2 questions I should ask the document's authors in our next meeting. This test specifically favors Claude because of the context window advantage, and this is exactly where that advantage became impossible to ignore. Claude handled the full document without any degradation in quality on follow-up questions. It referenced specific page sections by content, connected ideas from the executive summary to contradictory details buried in appendices, and gave analysis that felt like it had actually read and understood the entire document rather than summarizing the opening pages. ChatGPT handled the task reasonably but started to lose coherence on nuanced follow-up questions about specific sections. For anyone who regularly works with long contracts, research reports, legal documents, or complex strategy papers, this difference is not marginal. It is the difference between a useful tool and a genuinely transformative one. Round 4 was coding assistance. I gave all 3 the same task. Write a Python script that reads a CSV file containing sales data, cleans the data by removing duplicate entries and rows with missing values, calculates basic summary statistics for each product category, and outputs a formatted report. All 3 produced working code. The differentiation came in the quality of the explanation, the robustness of the error handling, and the thoughtfulness of the approach to edge cases. ChatGPT produced clean, well-commented code with solid error handling and proactively added edge case coverage for things like empty files and malformed rows without being asked. Claude produced similarly strong code with clear inline comments explaining the logic of each section, making it easy to understand and modify. Gemini's code was functional, but the explanation was more surface level and the error handling less comprehensive. For coding tasks, ChatGPT and Claude are essentially tied at the top, and both are excellent choices. If you are working in an environment with a lot of Google tooling, Gemini's ability to read and interact with your Google Drive files adds real practical value. Round 5 was brainstorming and creative ideation. I asked all 3 for 10 genuinely unconventional marketing ideas for a B2B software product targeting operations teams at mid-size companies. The instruction was explicit: avoid generic frameworks and standard tactics. I specifically wanted unexpected angles. ChatGPT produced a solid list with a few entries that showed genuine lateral thinking alongside some more conventional suggestions. Gemini produced a competent list but leaned toward established frameworks rather than unexpected approaches. Claude produced the list that felt most considered and most distinctive. The ideas showed evidence of actually thinking about the specific psychology of the target audience rather than applying a marketing ideation template. For creative work, concept development, and anything requiring genuine divergent thinking, Claude is consistently my first choice. Round 6 was reasoning through complex problems. I gave all three a multi-part scenario. A company has received 2 acquisition offers with different financial structures, different strategic implications, different risk profiles, and different timelines. I provided all the relevant details and asked each AI to analyze the decision and give a recommendation. ChatGPT walked through the financial considerations clearly and organized. Gemini was structured and thorough but felt like it was methodically checking boxes on a standard M and evaluation framework. Claude went deeper. It identified a tension in the deal structure that I had not explicitly flagged as a concern, pointed out a downstream implication in one offer that would matter significantly in a potential future fundraising round, and framed the recommendation in a way that helped me think about the decision differently rather than just confirming what I already suspected. For complex multi-step reasoning and nuanced analytical work, Claude is the model I trust most. Round 7 was handling ambiguous instructions. In real professional work, you rarely get perfectly clear briefs. I gave all three a deliberately vague request: help me improve my team's communication. No context. No specifics. No industry. I wanted to see how each AI handled the ambiguity. ChatGPT launched directly into a list of 10 general communication improvement tips. Useful, but it assumed a direction without checking. Gemini did something similar, producing a structured set of recommendations based on assumed context. Claude did something different. It acknowledged the ambiguity directly and asked 3 focused clarifying questions before offering any recommendations. What does your team look like? What kind of communication is breaking down? And what outcome would success look like in 60 days? That response is more useful even though it is shorter, because it avoids wasting your time with advice that might be completely irrelevant to your actual situation. For tasks where the quality of the output depends heavily on understanding the real context, Claude's tendency to ask before assuming is a genuine differentiator. Round 8 was handling sensitive or nuanced topics. I asked all 3 to help draft a message to an employee who was underperforming but who also seemed to be struggling personally. The message needed to hold the person accountable professionally while also acknowledging the human situation with genuine care. This is one of the hardest types of communication to get right, and it is the kind of task where generic output is actually worse than no output at all because it can damage real relationships. ChatGPT produced a competent draft that was professional and structured. Gemini produced something similar in tone. Claude produced a draft that felt noticeably more human. The language acknowledged the difficulty of the conversation without being condescending. It created space for the employee to respond rather than backing them into a corner. It separated the professional accountability piece from the personal support piece in a way that made both feel genuine rather than formulaic. For any communication where the emotional stakes are real, the quality gap between Claude and the other 2 was the most pronounced of any test I ran. So let us build the complete picture. After 3 weeks of real-world testing across 6 different categories, here is where each AI actually wins. ChatGPT is the best choice when you need the largest ecosystem of integrations, plugins, and third-party tools. When image generation is part of your workflow. When you need coding assistance and want the most widely documented AI with the largest community of users sharing prompts and techniques. When you want the tool with the broadest general capability across the widest range of tasks. Gemini is the best choice when you need real-time information and current events. When you live and work inside Google Workspace and want an AI that connects directly to your actual files, emails, and calendar. When you are doing research on fast-moving topics where information from even a few weeks ago might be outdated. When the integration with your existing Google tools matters more than raw analytical capability. Claude is the best choice when you are working with long documents that require careful reading and analysis rather than surface-level summarization. When the tone and quality of your writing output matters and generic-sounding content is not acceptable. When you need complex multi-step reasoning and you want a model that is going to acknowledge uncertainty rather than fill gaps with confident errors. When precision matters more than speed. Here is the practical recommendation I give to everyone who asks me about this. Use Claude as your default for core daily knowledge work. Keep Gemini open specifically for anything that requires current information. Maintain a ChatGPT account for its ecosystem and image generation. All three have free tiers you can start with today. The professionals getting the most value out of AI in 2026 are not the ones who picked a single tool and ignored the others. They are the ones who understand the actual strengths of each and switch between them the way a craftsperson picks the right tool for the specific job in front of them. That is the real answer to which AI is best. The best one is the one that matches what you actually need to do right now. If you have a strong opinion about which of these three is your daily driver and why, leave it in the comments. I read every single one and the discussion on these comparison videos is always genuinely interesting. Subscribe for more weekly breakdowns and I will see you in the next one.